Welcome to my term project presentation. This is for AMGT302. So for my term project this semester, I chose to investigate and conduct my research on the parts and accessories business at a Chrysler dealership. This is a franchise business between the dealership network and FCA, which is Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. The particular dealership I chose was Performance Chrysler, which is located in Centerville, Ohio. They've been around for a long time, since about 1986, and they're part of an auto group, which has 17 dealerships nationwide. Something that I was particularly drawn to with this project was the parts and accessories part of this topic, which isn't typical of a parts department at a dealership, but this particular auto group actually opened up a store called Jeepland, which is basically it's only the second one ever established in the nation, and it's kind of a project by FCA to try to lift up some of the Jeep sales and kind of bring back the enthusiasm that Jeep people, so to speak, used to have. They basically, and the cool thing about Jeepland is they sell everything Jeep. It's not just a traditional parts store where you get your parts that you need for your car for replacement, and they sell some accessories and add-ons that they'll usually distribute to sales for sales deals. They actually sell anything from backpacks to strollers to bicycles and anything you can think of related to your Jeep. So when I did my investigation and went on site and did my interviews, my takeaway was very positive from both places. You know, the staff was friendly, they were approachable, they were all working really hard, they were busy. Both parts managers were very approachable. The Chrysler store tended to have more of a traditional feel. You go in and get three guys or gals at a counter, and they're answering phones and conducting business. Jeepland was more modern. It was more designed around the theme of Jeep, and you could just tell by some of the props they had and just the attitudes of the employees there. They were very enthusiastic about Jeep. They had, you know, the design of the building, the concepts. You know, the actual building has like a rustic orange and gray finish to it. You know, they had Jeeps flexed out on rocks in the front of the property. It was a really cool environment. So basically how a parts department operates in a franchised business like this, you know, they're open from 8 to 7, pretty typical hours. That's pretty competitive with the chain stores. If you're a customer, you can call the dealership anytime and speak with a parts consultant and inquire about any parts or accessories you're interested in. And you can actually go on the FCA's main website. There's a couple different websites you can access this from, and it basically gives you a pretty detailed catalog of any parts or accessories you could be after, which are pretty much exclusive to this particular franchise. You know, you can't get a lot of these Mopar accessories and add-ons and stuff for your car just anywhere. You have to get them through the dealership network. When you do inquire about a specific part that's not really an accessory, you have to supply a VIN number. Usually they'll ask you for the last 8, but if you have the whole VIN, that's usually helpful. And then if the part's in stock, obviously the transaction occurs immediately and you're on your way after you find what you need. But if it's not in stock, there's a process. Basically, the dealership can use a locator database, which will find the particular part number that you're looking for and see if any dealerships close by have it. If that's the case, they can usually get it that day pretty quickly. If not, you know, they can it can obviously be special ordered. But to go into more detail about the locator, there's some dealerships that really have a lot of parts, and they have a lot of like back stock of parts, and they'll kind of act as their own kind of parts depot, so to speak, for supplying parts to other Chrysler dealerships. Zimmer Chrysler in Cincinnati is one that's around us that is kind of fills that role. And of course, if nobody can locate the part, each dealership is divided. Basically, each dealership is in its own region or business center, and it has a parts depot, and that's basically the main warehouse. And the parts consultant will fill out a special order card. They'll submit it to Chrysler, and they should get it the next day, depending on the availability from the supplier. If the part's on back order, of course, that information will be known by the parts consultant, and they're basically doing this whole process through a virtual catalog, which is called Star Parts, and it has everything you need to know about your car and parts and all that stuff. The dealerships also, when I did my interviews, they showed how they actually have physical catalogs too, which is how they used to do it before everything was, internet and computer based. Everything was in the catalog. They still supplied, FCA still supplies catalogs, and they still use that to look up parts that are sometimes difficult to look up, or especially accessories, because there's so many different accessories, it's hard to keep those updated in the catalog. So they'll actually send out hard copy catalogs to the dealerships so that they can inquire about them that way. And this interaction between the parts department and the general public is very similar to how it is with the service department. Now for the franchise agreement. Basically, to start off with this, the franchise agreement for Chrysler, as it relates to the parts department and the dealership as a whole, really, it's separated into two major parts. I was actually not able to get the franchise agreement from the dealership I investigated, but I actually was able to reach out to the network manager for the Great Lakes Business Center, which is the business center that we fall under, where I'm at, and these Chrysler dealerships that I investigated. And I was able to get a copy of everything I needed, luckily. So basically, like I said, two parts: the sales and service agreement, and then the additional terms and provisions. And basically, the additional terms and provisions, is just a more detailed information section of the actual franchise agreement. It's basically broken down into 11 sections. You got the intro, which is the basic establishment of the terms by which the sales and service side at the dealership are going to be conducted within the specified dealer and the relationship with the manufacturer. Next section is the products covered, and it basically says that the dealer must sell only specified FCA U.S. Vehicles and parts that are manufactured for sale within the United States. Section after that's the dealer's management, and this basically states that you're going to have one designated employee at the dealership that's going to sign and be actively present most of the time at the dealership as kind of the manager of overseeing sales and service of all the FCA products, whether it be cars sold or parts, accessories, service, all that stuff. And then the dealer's capital stock or partnership interest is basically, if the dealership's a corporation or partnership, they must break down their shareholders and the stocks and the amount owed and who they are and who they're designated to. Then the sales locality, this is basically saying that the dealership will actively sell and market FCA vehicles, parts, service, and all that stuff within their particular locality. Now, they can sell outside the locality anywhere within the United States or to another dealership, but they emphasize their locality. The additional terms and provisions, basically, just talking about the document in this agreement. Former agreements, representations, or statements. Basically, any other agreement obligated by the dealer is superseded by this agreement, unless money is owed from a past, like warranty audit, parts audit, something of that nature. They're still, they're not off the hook financially, basically. The waiver and modification, no waiver changes the terms of this agreement. For the amendment section, basically saying this agreement doesn't expire unless terminated under limited circumstances clause. Arbitration basically goes on to detail the arbitration laws and how you would resolve any of that. And there's basically a majority vote with 3 appointed arbitrators. And then the last section is the signature. As for the additional terms and provisions, this is where it gets into how it's really relative to the parts department and their network and their marketing and how they're selling and all that, and basically all the facets of the business. And it basically says that they must provide new or manufactured parts directly involved in the manufacture of specified vehicles properly identified by the manufacturer. They emphasize heavily that the dealership should energetically and try to, as effectively as possible, retail all parts manufactured for sale by FCA. This is basically to keep up with competition because there's other entities that can get a hold of OEM parts and sell them and try to sell them cheaper. The dealer must provide facilities for selling the parts that are satisfactory to FCA. As it relates to appearance, layout, etc. That all must be maintained and orderly. And the dealer must employ, in accordance with the volume of the dealer's business, an acceptable number of competent parts department employees. And these employees are required to receive training periodically produced by Chrysler. It's not really consistent, but there is training for new things that come about and things that need to be known by the parts department. The manufacturer will ship parts according to the orders placed by the particular dealer, so special order inquiries will be fulfilled by the dealership. As far as transportation, the manufacturer is going to transport these parts inquiries by any means necessary, really, rail, truck, boat, and they can actually have authorized vehicles that can be used to kind of facilitate the shipping and the distribution of these parts to the dealerships. The manufacturer can discontinue the sale of these parts at any time. And if the part is eligible for a return, the manufacturer allows up to 5% of the cost of the part to reimburse for shipping. This happens a lot in my interview. The parts manager talked about a lot of parts that if they don't sell well or the product gets or the actual vehicle gets discontinued, they're asked to send parts back, and a lot of times the manufacturer will tell them to basically dispose of the parts and destroy them so they can't be sold. The market for the dealership is pretty broad. The manufacturer, like I said before, wants them to aggressively market the sale of their products and services for competition purposes. And the particular dealer I investigated uses TV commercials, newspaper ads, email, social media, all kinds of stuff to market their products. Their target market is, pretty much anybody that has a vehicle and that needs parts or accessories. G-Plan tends to be more focused on the Jeep people and the off-road people and the enthusiasts. They each have their own YouTube and Facebook page. The Chrysler dealership particularly advertises having a large inventory and an experienced staff. They have guys that have been there for like 20 plus years, so they're really knowledgeable. And the parts department, they're going to market to the general public, and they're even going to market to their own dealership, because when you're selling vehicles, Sometimes you need parts for them. Sometimes you need accessories. If somebody wants to buy a truck and they want, they want to buy the truck, but one of the terms of their purchase is they want side steps or a tonneau cover. That's something that the parts department can supply and help the whole deal go through. And then, of course, independent automotive facilities, they will come in and inquire about receiving parts